Alright, we just finished up the head gasket here on the Saturn. I wanted to kind of talk with you guys about a couple things. Once we got done with the Saturn, got done with the head gasket, it was still overheating. Now it's been really cold here. It's been about 14 degrees here in Utah. It's the middle of January. This video may come up a little bit later through the year. A little bit behind schedule on videos. I've got about 30 videos still in post, so I apologize for the delay. We're actually going to probably start doing probably 2 or 3 videos a week just to get caught back up. We have a lot of videos on AstroQuake that are still in production right now and still in post. So anyway, so it's been really cold here, so I wanted to kind of talk with you about what we found. Once we did the head gasket, we still had the car was overheating. So what I did is I did a compression test. My first compression test when I started, I was on cylinder 4. It was leaking down from 90 psi down to 60 psi at a 15-minute leak down. After we did the head gasket, I did a retest, went 130 all the way across the board. All 4 cylinders were hitting 130, but the car was still overheating. So what I found is that the engine was clogged up with a lot of that old coolant that was mixing with the oil, and we had to go through a system and flushing that out. So I want to kind of talk with you about what I did. I'm going to break it down into 4 parts. You have the heater core, you have the engine block, you have the radiator, and the expansion chamber. Now this car has an expansion chamber, which was kind of puzzling for me, but I did some research and I found a way to bypass that expansion chamber so that I could still flush out the system. And I'm going to take you over the car and I'm going to show you how I did it and what I needed to do. Now Rich Pin did a video, a 2-part video on a head gasket. If you just go into YouTube, you Google Rich Pin, the video will come up, and I'll also put a link down below and some diagrams of places you can go to get, you know, the firing order, compression test, timing order, that kind of thing. So I'll put some links down in the description below. But this is continuing from the last video that we did on replacing the head gasket, which I think is probably going to be a 2-part video as well. So we take you over to the car. Let me show you the 4-step process and how I flushed out the whole system and got the car to cool efficiently to where it would not overheat. When the car was done and it's still overheating, it was kind of puzzling for me, and then I realized that the system was not breathing, the coolant was not flowing through the engine. Even though we had fixed the problem with the blown head gasket, we still had a problem internally inside the engine, and we needed to flush it out. So I'm going to show you what we did to do that. Alright, so we're here over at the car. I'm going to show you the 4 steps that I needed to go through. The first one was we needed to remove the expansion chamber, which is right over here. This is our expansion chamber. Okay. The next step is we needed to remove the heater hoses. Now this is a little bit tricky. You have one heater hose that's right down here on the water pump. We can see that little white piece of paper. That's an outlet from the heater, or sorry, from the water pump. That's a heater hose that goes around, okay, and over to the back into the firewall right here, okay. Then the out comes from the firewall up to the top, the bottom of this throttle body, okay. So those were the next things that needed to be removed, okay? The next thing we needed to do is remove the upper and lower radiator hose. Now the reason that we had to do it this way is, I'll explain it through my process here. Right down here you have the thermostat inlet from the bottom of the radiator hose. Right here you have the top radiator hose that goes around and connects right to the top of the head. Then you also have this expansion line that goes up. Move this out of the way. This expansion line is for an overflow, goes up and over this way, and then connects right to the top of the expansion chamber. So now what I had to actually do, I had to break it down into 3 different parts. And so I'll show it to you the best I can. Hopefully this camera picks up. You have your cooling system in your radiator, you have your engine block, and you have your heater core. So there's 3 separate chambers. So I divided it up as you have your engine block is chamber 1, your heater core is chamber 2, and your radiator is chamber 3, okay? And then there was a specific way that I had to do it. I found this off of another video, and I'll put a link down below on this one, and it shows the direction of actually how the water flows. So you have, and this was kind of confusing for me as well, so the radiator brings in the water from the top, it comes down through the radiator, the fan cools it, comes out of the bottom of the radiator up into the water pump pushes it through the engine, and also pushes it through the heater hoses into the heater core, out of the heater core, back into the top of the head, and then it returns right here at the thermostat, shoots back in so that it makes a complete revolution throughout the engine. This one here is just a little easier to see. And so what I did is I kind of broke it down into 3 parts. The expansion chamber being actually number 4. But the engine itself has 3 parts. You have the engine block, you have the radiator, you have the heater, and then you have the radiator. So what I did, I'm going to take you step by step what I did to actually fix the problem. Alright, so my first step was I needed to flush out the engine, okay? I knew there was crud inside the engine, so the thing you have to do to flush out the engine, you take out the radiator hose. Now I disconnected it right here, and then I also disconnected the bottom of the heater hose. And then what I did is I took and I let fresh water come in here, and I just used hot water, okay? And I put hot water coming in here, I started the engine up, and then I let the engine bleed out here on the bottom. Now I tried to do it in reverse and try to send water up, but you know, with gravity it was really hard to send water uphill. You get a better flush if you can send it uphill. But what I ended up doing is I just connected a heater hose, or I connected the garden hose here with warm water, and I let it run with the engine on, and then I let it I just undid this and I let it come out the bottom. So I've basically flushed through the top of the head, through the bottom of the block, and then it all came out here. And there was amazing amount of stuff that came out of here. So that's how I flushed out the engine, okay? So then the next step is what we did was the radiator, and I'm going to show you how I did that. Okay, back to my diagram. On your radiator you have a top and a bottom. Now the way that it's set up, that your actual top part, I got some of these diagrams from the internet, and I got them from some videos, and I'm going to show you on those as well. But if you look at the diagram, the water comes out of the thermostat to the top of the radiator and then comes down. So I figured that was the rule of motion. So what I did is I took off the top radiator hose, which I did also on the block, but I took it off here, and then I put water through this hose, and then I just left this disconnected down here, so that basically I got hot water coming in, going through the top of the radiator, down the radiator, and then draining out here, okay? So then that's how I basically drained out and flushed out the radiator system. Okay, now back to our map again. Now we're talking about the heater core. This was step 3. This was the actual thing that I need. This is where the biggest clog was coming from. So back to the water pump. The thermostat's right here, and the water pump's actually on the other side, okay? So you have to take the thermostat out to do this so that it'll flush through the system. If you leave the thermostat in, and the temperature doesn't get up to 182 degrees, this will all go to pot. So you can't do this without taking out the thermostat. So basically what I did is I followed this heater hose for flushing out the heater core. I followed this hose, okay, and I realized that it comes right in here to the expansion chamber. This was the part that was confusing for me. It came in here, came up to the bottom of the expansion chamber, okay, and then you have this line that goes around to the top. So what I did is I just removed the expansion chamber. I actually put a screwdriver in here, and then I just clamped it down. And so I also put a flush kit, like one of the flush kits that you get from, you know, O'Reilly or whatever. I put a flush kit in here with a little T-valve so that I was able to send water into this, and then it was able to come out here. The thing was, the water pump is right here. It actually pushes water out. So I had to clog this off, right? Put water into the top of the engine, have it come down so the water pump could kick it, push it out through the back into the firewall, and then I just released it. I unplugged the line. It's right here behind this throttle positioning sensor. That's where the heater hose is. You got to remove this. You got to remove these 2 plugs, and it's right back there. And so I was able to flush it through the whole system, out in the heater core, out the heater core, and then I just let it drain right here. And that helped flush out the heater core. But my problem wasn't solved because my expansion chamber was still clogged. All right, so back to my diagram. If you look here, you got your heater right there, your engine block right there, and your radiator right there. And even on this diagram, you have your radiator, your water pump, your block, your heater core. Problem is, this particular car has that stupid expansion chamber, which was really confusing for me. So I did my research and I found that there's a line that comes right from the top of the head, okay? I drew it right here. This is the top of the head. This is that line I was talking about. This line comes up. Now this is an expansion chamber line. Now what this line is designed to do, this line actually, when the engine gets hot, it will send excess coolant over here and drop into the expansion chamber. When the engine cools, it'll siphon it back through the top of the engine, back into here. This is kind of like an overflow valve. So it was confusing for me, but what I realized is this is just another chamber. So if you look back over to here, you've got 1 chamber, 2 chambers, 3 chambers, being your radiator, your engine, and your heater core. I just added a chamber. So what I did with this is I was able to undo this. I flushed out this line. This line was actually clogged, so it wasn't allowing it to build pressure. So it was clogged right here. So I undid it. I flushed this out with air, and then I flushed out the line so that I could get good flow back through here. Because this needs to be able to kick pressure back, and then also needs to be able to siphon it back in to keep your pressure regulated. So that's what I did. And then I took the expansion chamber completely out. It's got 2 10mm bolts. Took the expansion chamber out, put some dish detergent in there, cleaned it all out, and now this is pretty much clear. Now there's still a little bit of residue from the buildup of the oil and coolant, but for the most part the engine's cooling now. It's about 5 degrees out here today. It's even getting colder here. The engine's cooling, the heater works, everything's working correctly. There's still a little bit of oil residue in the engine, and what I recommend, after you do this whole flush system, make sure you put some antifreeze in it, run it around for a couple weeks, get a little syringe, not a syringe, but like a turkey baster. Get a turkey baster and squeeze, the top of the oil that's in here, because oil will always rise to the top of the expansion chamber. When the engine's cool, then just use your turkey baster to pull that oil out, squeeze it out. Do that, for 2 or 3 weeks until you can flush out the system. Then once that's all done and all the coolant's out, then you can go through and reflush the system, put some distilled water and some fresh coolant in there, and then change the oil. But I still got to probably put a couple 100 miles on it so I can flush out the system. But that's what I did to fix the problem. It fixed the overheat. Car works perfectly now. It's got great power, 130 psi on each cylinder. I think from factory they came from about 140, 150. So it's still got really good compression, good power. The engine's not overheating anymore. So mission accomplished. So hopefully you liked the video. Please let me know. Please rate the video and subscribe. And we'll talk to you guys on the next one.